Size matters. So does size matter when it comes to LDL cholesterol and particle size or oxidation? You hear all these influencers that have literally no clue about cholesterol on Instagram, on Facebook, on YouTube, on TikTok, all day, all night, talking about it's the small particles that are dangerous and the big fluffy ones are okay, and the oxidized state and your HDL and triglyceride ratios and all this. You have to be metabolically healthy. Look, I did an entire article. Look, I'm a cardiologist. This is my job. This is what I've been doing for a living. I eat, live, breathe, sleep, and dream of cholesterol. This is what I do. I go to conferences, I go to research, I speak at conferences. This is literally my job. Now, while historically small particle LDL has been shown to be a little bit more atherogenic, the data on that has not been always reliable and always reproducible. It has not been independently associated with increased CVD risk. So regardless of like how small it is, the problem also with small LDLs, you have more of them. When you have big fluffy ones, you have less of them. So the one thing that we know without question over the last 100 years of research on cholesterol, and LDL and cholesterol is literally the most studied thing in all of medicine. The one thing we know about it without question, because heart disease is the number one killer, that's why it's the most studied thing in all of medicine. The one thing we know without question is total LDL, just total LDL. Nothing else correlates the most with heart disease. Not only correlates, but actually causes heart disease. There's been some recent studies, Mendelian genetic type studies and meta-analyses, where it showed that the LDL in and of itself causes atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease. So there's no question anymore. People are like, well, it's not the LDL. You can eat all the saturated fat you want. My LDL's through the roof. I'm okay. My calcium score is 0, blah, blah, blah. No, LDL causes heart disease. Without question. You have more heart attacks and more strokes. It's the single most reliable test. Now, the way LDL is calculated sometimes at certain labs is a little tricky. If your triglycerides are too low or too high, it throws that number off and it's not as reliable as a direct LDL. So you can order an actual direct LDL and that will tell us what your LDL is and what your risk is. Are there any patients that actually need a NMR or a fractionated LDL or a total count on LDL, or whether they're small or big sizes or any of that? No. In my 10 years of doing this, and if you include residency and medical school and all that, it's like 20 years now. I don't think in my mind I've ever thought I needed to order a NMR or fractionated lipid panel on anyone. I don't personally order them. If your LDL is high, you are going to have a heart attack or a stroke at some point, especially if you're a smoker and diabetic and all that stuff. It compounds the problem. Are there young people that have LDLs that are high and end up with heart attack and strokes that are super young, lean, healthy athletes that never smoked? Absolutely. We have young 15, 20-year-olds that are super athletic, super lean, eat like healthy, super, whatever, but they have a genetically high LDL. They will have open heart surgery by age 36 and maybe not even make it to 50 if they don't get that treated. The highest LDLs I've seen are like 600, 700. That's obviously a genetic condition called familial hypercholesterolemia. It's treated very aggressively, but the average regular person, if your LDL is over 190, you probably have that. But for the vast majority of people, there was a study called the PISA trial, PESA, and I'll post it below, where they looked at people with normal LDLs, like 100 to 110. 45% of them, meaning almost half, had atherosclerosis in at least one bed, whether it was the carotids, the coronaries, the aorta, the renals, the iliofemoral arteries. They had plaquing. 45% of people with a normal LDL had plaque. The other problem is they found 60% of those had it in more than one bed. So 60% of people with LDLs of 100 to 110 actually had plaquing in multiple different beds and arterial beds in the body, which is obviously horrific. You don't want that. So we do need to set our LDL goals lower, but it's hard to get the medical societies, the American Heart Association, the American College of Cardiology to agree to that. We've always been arguing that the total cholesterol should be 150 or less. And LDL targets should be under 100. They should be like in the 80s and 90s. And that's what we consider normal. If you look at what newborns are born with, which I also talk about in multiple videos, newborns have an LDL around 30 to 40. And we've now been able to drive LDLs that low. And there's been no deleterious effects. The LDLs being down into the 7, 8, 15, 10 range, nothing bad happens. Now, before people jump on me and say, well, there was this one Danish study that showed that mortality goes up with low LDL. They split it up. They did that study. People with the lowest LDLs did ultimately die of cancer. Like, you will live longer. You won't have a heart attack or stroke. You'll live longer. You have to die of something. Their all-cause mortality and cancer deaths did go up at very low LDLs. But for every person in that study, the lower the LDL, the less likely they were to have a heart attack or stroke, peripheral artery disease, anything related to cardiovascular disease. Without question, the curve was like, lower the LDL, nothing happened. And we know from previous studies, with an LDL of 57 or less, there's no heart attacks and there's no strokes. So that would be my response to all these crazy influencers out there trying to say all this crazy stuff that LDL is okay and it's good for you. No, it absolutely is not. It causes heart disease. So let's not get too wild and get too crazy on this stuff. All right, people. Hope that helps. Send it to somebody who needs to hear it. Share my stuff. Grab more of my free stuff below.